All right, Jabosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning's shir. Sorry. Okay, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Yanki and Elisa Statman and Yitzi and Rebecca Statman for dedicating all the shiurim this month in commemoration of the first yard site of their sister, Menucha Shendel Yehudis Zichron Levracha Bas David Yosef. To thank Shmuel Rabin Karabkin for dedicating the shiurim this month in commemoration of the 25th yard site of Rabin's mother, Pesa Mira Bas Chaim Zichron Levracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshamas will have an aliyah and the family's Einachama. Rabbi say with that, let us begin. So Rabbi say yesterday was like Daf Yomi Kriyas Yamsuf for us over here. Right? So Rabbi say we actually are picking up today on Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph at the Mishnah. At the Mishnah, yes, that is correct. At the Mishnah. Baruch Hashem. Admittedly, we did go a little bit quickly, right? But again, also we're at the Mishnah starting a really fascinating sugya today. So it says in the Mishnah as follows: Nidre Onsin. So says, if you remember again, in the beginning of this chapter, right, the beginning of the third parak of Nedarim, so the Mishnah stated, Arba Nedarim etiru chachamim. So ultimately, again, there are four types of Nedarim which do not require hatara, because effectively they're void from the beginning. In other words, they're not Nedarim. So we've spent a significant amount of time speaking about Nidre Zerazin, right? And now we're going to go ahead and speak about Nidre Onsin. Although Rabbi say we're going to see that halacha l'maisa, there is some degree of overlap in between some of these categories, as we'll see. So here we go. Mishnah, really fascinating. Nidre Onsin. So we'll say, what's the example of Nidre Onsin? Now we know what's an ones. Ones is an extenuating circumstance. So what's Nidre Onsin? So it says the Mishnah, Hediru chaveru sheyochal etzla. So we'll say, it's interesting. This is always like the go-to case. So what happens? I go over to Reuven and say, Reuven, I really want you to come over to my house for lunch. And if you don't come over to my house for lunch, konam my property on you. Right? So all of my property will become usher like a carbon to you. Okay, now what happens? So I will say, fine. And Reuven says, okay, that's the neder. The chalahu, oshe chalabano. So I'll say, so what happens? Now Reuven becomes ill, or his son becomes ill, oshe akvo nahar, or the river became swollen, and he was unable to pass it. What's talacha? Hare elu nidre onsin. So we'll say these are all examples of nidre onsin. So we'll say all of this ultimately again are examples halacha l'maisa again of an extenuating circumstance, and therefore we'll say again. Remember, what's the net effect? Reuven doesn't come to my house, but even though Reuven didn't come to my house, and even according to the neder, what happens if Reuven doesn't come to my house? What happens? My property becomes usher to him like a carbon because he didn't. Because he didn't come because of an ones. Because of an extenuating circumstance, therefore halacha l'maisa again, essentially the neder does not kick into effect. Now, I will say, take a look at the Ran for just a moment. The Ran's on the left-hand side. It's actually the last of the intermediate wide lines. The Ran writes, Neder nidre onsin hediru chaveru shiochal imo o shechala kilomar da'afa gav delav ones gamerhu. That I will say, the Ran is making an amazing observation here. If you look at the example, right, I made Reuven take the neder, right, or I posed the neder upon Reuven, or I made the neder, which has an effect on Reuven. Now, Reuven doesn't come because his son is sick. Then I will say, does his son's sickness prevent him absolutely from coming to my home? No, he could find someone else to stay with his son. But I will say, but again, it's the type of circumstance where it makes sense for Reuven to be with his kids. So the Ran is pointing out over here, in the world of onsin, there are different types of extenuating circumstances. There's an extenuating circumstance which makes something impossible, and there's an extenuating circumstance which makes something very difficult. The case of onsin in our Mishnah doesn't have to be a circumstance which makes compliance with the neder impossible. It just has to be a circumstance which makes compliance with the neder difficult. So interestingly enough, there's a lower threshold for ones over here. Incredible. So the Ran goes on, Hare elu nidre onsin. The Ran says, Lefishalo Allah al daito lesser nechasav achavero im lo yochal imo ela kishe yuchal lava below ones klal velo yovo. In other words, we'll say, when I made the neder, what was the intention of my neder? that if Reuven doesn't come to eat at my house, ultimately my property is going to be usher upon him. But what's my intention? My intention was never regarding an ones. In other words, Rabbi say, the whole chap over here is, that was never the intention of my neder. Of course, if Reuven's kid is sick and he's got to stay home, or the river is swollen and he can't make it across, I never had in mind to begin with that my neder should be chal in such a situation. Aval kol shene'enas ktsas, kegon shechala b'no v'tzarach l'shamro, motor, dalav adaiti dahachi adjei. So both say, so again, that's why here the Ran says it explicitly again, kol shene'enas ktsas. All you need is a ktsas onis, right? An onisala, right? Like a shtickle onis, right? All you need is a little onis, right? And that's enough ultimately to prevent the neder from going ahead and taking effect. So I will say, really fascinating. Now, what's interesting about this, I will say, is I'll just tell you what's interesting is in general when it comes to Nedarim, right? Same things by Shavuos. We normally say Devarim shebalev einam Devarim. What you're thinking doesn't matter. It's what you say ultimately that matters, which is a good clown in life in general. But I would say, but here's what's interesting about this case is here. But why don't you say again what you said? You didn't make any qualifications. What the Mishnah is saying is it's understood that this is daito shel b'nei adam. This is how people think. In other words, my whole point is I want Reuven to come over to my house for a meal. But of course I recognize that there are things that come up in life that prevent people from coming over for lunch. And I never have in mind for the neder to go into effect in a situation like that. So I will say this is the case of nidre onsin. So again, one more time, Reuven, come over to my house for lunch, and if you don't, all of my property is usher to you. Reuven's son gets sick, the river gets swollen, he can't make it over, the neder does not go into effect. Nidre onsin, that's an ones. Doesn't have to be a major ones, doesn't have to be ones gadol, even ones ktsas has the ability to prevent the neder from taking effect. Incredible. Let's go weiter. A lot more to say on this, but let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. Ho Gavra. What's the Gemara tells the story? Ho Gavra. The itfis zechusa bebeidina. So this is really a fascinating case. There was a guy. Who zechusa means, if you could just imagine for this for just a moment, I'm having a legal dispute with Reuven about a parcel of land. Okay? I have some documentation which supports my claim to the land, but it's not enough to win the case. It's not enough to win the case. So what do? I give over my documentation to the Beis Din, right? And what happens? Va'amar, and I say to the Beis Din, Ilo asina atlasin yomin libatlun hani zichusai. I hereby, right? If I don't come back within 30 days, I hear all of my claims should be batal. So essentially, if I don't come back in 30 days, ultimately, again, any claims I have to this real estate should be absolutely batal. Now, let's take a look at this case over. Look at the Ran again. Now we're in the end of the second wide line of the Ran. Really interesting. Hi Gavra, bikesh mi Beis Din sheyitnu lo zman. So the Ran gives us the context. I'm in Beis Din with Reuven. We're having a dispute about a piece of real estate. I say, you know what? I need some time to assemble my paperwork. I need some time to assemble my paperwork to support my claim. Now the Ran says, "Ukidesam b'Sanhedrin shekol rayos sheish lechalahavi heve mikan ad lavin yom." So we'll say now again that is a legitimate request, right? A request for a delay, not a delay, postponement. Thank you, postponement, right? Because I need to gather my paperwork. Fine. Look at the Ran. Ubeis din chashashu shemalo amar kain ela lishamet mehen. So listen to this. But what is Beis Din concerned about? Beis Din is concerned that it's just a delay tactic. Just a delay, and I have some other plan going on over here. So what happens? So I need the time. Beis Din is concerned to give me the time. So I come up with this deal. So what does Beis Din say? Beis Din says, okay, hand over your paperwork. Hand over your paperwork and make it tonight that if you don't come back within 30 days, essentially you give up your claims to this particular parcel of land. That's the case. Okay, back to the Gemara. Rabbi says, sure enough, what happens? Isnis v'lo asa. Okay, you know how the story was going to end. What happened? Some type of extenuating circumstance occurred, and I don't make it back to Beis Din within 30 days. So now what's the shaila? So Rabbi said, now remember again, I didn't make it back, it's true, but why didn't I make it back? Why not? Ones. It was an extenuating circumstance. So let's analyze. Says the Gemara. So what's that machlokes? Amar Rafuna, batal zechusei. Rav Huna says, no, a Tanai is a Tanai. He made a Tanai, he made a condition. You said if you don't come back within 30 days, you relinquish your rights. You relinquish your rights. And I also remember again, I gave over any supporting documentation I had to this land. So you relinquished your rights. I didn't make it back within 30 days. That's it. Amarle Rava says, no. Anosu va'anos rachmana patre. Rava says, what are you talking about? This is an ones. This is an extenuating circumstance. And Rava says, what's the halacha by ones? The Torah exempts you in a case of ones. I will say, by the way, all of us know that principle of ones rachmana patre, that the Torah goes ahead and exempts me in a case of extenuating circumstances. Interestingly enough, what's the makar for that? The chsiv v'lad na'ara lo sa'ased davar. Rabbi say, this is incredible. This is a man who violates a girl who is betrothed, the nara mu'urasa. So the Torah says he is put to death for the sin of adultery, and to her, you do nothing. There's no liability on her part. I will say, why is there no liability on her part? Obviously, because this is being done against her will. In other words, she's an ones. This is an extenuating circumstance. See, interesting. I will say, by the way, I'll just point out, the Hebrew word for violation, right, for rape is ones. So this becomes the paradigmatic example, right? Na'ara me'urasa becomes the paradigmatic example of ones rachmana patre. So Rava says, listen, it's true, I made the condition. If I don't come back within 30 days, I hereby relinquish my claim, but I didn't come back, not because I didn't want to, but because at the end of the day I was prevented from doing so. So the Gemara says, this is machlokes. So it says the Gemara, 1 second, Rava, you're bringing the principle of ones rachmana patre from a capital case, right? In other words, he'll say that's a capital case. In other words, a man violates a woman who's had kiddushin. Ultimately, again, that's adultery. So you're telling me again, the man is subject to execution. The girl, you don't do anything to her because it's an ones. So, but maybe ones rachmana patre only applies to capital cases, doesn't apply to other cases. V'chitema kitala shani. We'll say, take a quick look at the Ran again. The Ran is now 5 lines down on the wide lines. V'chitema kitala shani kilomar tebemokom kitala ika tainus ones. This is so fascinating because it's such a yesodistic Gemara. Maybe the concept of ones rachmana patre only applies in capital cases. And by the way, there's a very strong argument to make that. What's the very strong argument? That's the makar, right? That's the source for ones rachmana patre in a capital case. So maybe it only applies. Maybe the ability to say it was an extenuating circumstance, and therefore, again, I'm not liable, quote unquote, only applies in a capital case, doesn't apply in any other case. To which the Gemara says, no. But here we go. Nidre onsin. We'll say, what's the example? Now, Gemara quotes our Mishnah. What did our Mishnah say? Vatanan. Nidre onsin. We'll say, what's the case of Nidre onsin? Hediru chavero shiyochal etzlo. I go ahead and make a neder that Ruvain, you have to come eat by me. And if you don't come eat by me, my property is asr to you. V'chalahu o shechalabano. And then Ruvain became ill, or his son became ill. Or the river became swollen. Well, actually, I keep saying the river became swollen. We'll see actually what it means is he was prevented from crossing the river. What's the halacha? Hare elu nidre onsin. They will say these are nidre onsin. So what do you see from here? The Mishnah is applying the concept of ones as a legitimate excuse, even what? Or even where? In non-capital cases. There's another case. So you see that it appears that in halacha, we accept this principle of ones rachmana patre, that the Torah exempts you in cases of extenuating circumstances, in all cases, to which the Gemara says, Ulu Rava, now according to Rava, Maishna mehadisnan. I will say, why is this any different than the Fagis? I will say, so just to understand what's happening over here, we're focusing, right, we went from the Mishnah Nidre Onsin, so now what the Mishnah introduced us to is that if the subject of the neder does not comply with the neder because of an extenuating circumstance, that extenuating circumstance essentially prevents the neder from kicking in. Okay, the Gemara then segues into a different kind of case. I have a claim. I'm in Beis Din with Ruvain about a parcel of land. I say the land is mine. Ruvain says the land is his. I have some documentation to support my claim, but not enough. I need some time to get it. I tell Beis Din, if I don't come back in 30 days, ultimately, again, I relinquish my rights. I don't make it back in 30 days. Why not? An ones situation. Same circumstance. Rav Huna says, sorry, you didn't make it up. Case closed, you relinquish your ownership. Rava, ones rachmana patre. So I'll say, so now we're trying to get our legs in this machlokes. So here we go. So Rava, according to Rava, Maishna, remember again, Rava is the one who holds ones rachmana patre, even in this real estate case. According to Rava, why is this different than the following case? I will say we've seen this case so many times throughout Shas. Great case. So watch this. Reuven gives to his wife Rachel a get. Reuven is traveling overseas. He gives her a get. And he says to her, if I don't come back within 12 months, the get ultimately again is valid. So we'll say that's the case. Now again, the truth is, this is actually an interesting case because the truth is, when is the get chal? Is it a retroactivity clause? Okay, not really important for us right now. The point over here is, Reuven's giving his wife a get. He's going overseas. If I don't come back in 12 months, you're divorced. Umeis besoch beis chodesh. And we'll say, what happens? What happens? He dies within the 12 months. So therefore, chances are that what? He's not coming back, right? It's not in this religion, right? So I'll say, so therefore, Lemaisa, he dies, and therefore he's not coming back. Obviously, the 12 months end, he's not coming back. What's the halacha? Harei a get. It's a get. They will say, now, Bepashas, why is it a get? Why is it a get? Because he made a condition. If I don't come back within 12 months, right, then the get is valid. So the Gemara says it's a get. But ask the Gemara, ba'amai, v'hamenas isnis. Rabosai, ein ones kidola mizo, right? The greatest ones in life is death. Death. So why don't we say he died, right? He died. Obviously, he would have come back. If not for a minor detail that he died, right? So Lamaisa, why don't we say ones rachmana patre would have come back if he could have, and therefore again the get is not chal. So the Gemara says, v'hamenas isnis. So the Gemara says, Amai, so why should the get be good? At the end of the day, v'hamenas isnis. After all, again, there was an extenuating circumstance and halacha l'maisa that prevented him from coming back. To which the Gemara says, Dilma shiny hasam. Perhaps this case is different. Why? Amud beis. Di'i havayada demis min la'alter have gamar v'yav gita. He will say this is actually different because in this case, had he realized he was going to die, he would have probably what? Given the get immediately. He will say, why is it that a man gives his wife a get in such a scenario like this, right? Now, the truth is, there could be a couple of reasons, right? One of it could be like an aguna situation, but the other classical one is yibum. Now, both say yibum is triggered when the husband dies. So what the Gemara is suggesting is his death is not a reason not to trigger the Tanai. If anything, again, had he realized that he was going to die, he would have for sure given her a get beforehand in order to allow her to avoid Yibum. I will say, if you go back to Amud Aleph for just a moment, because the Ran, it's a little bit, the pagination is a little bit off over here. The Ran is back on Amud Aleph. If you take a look, the Ran over here is 8 lines up from the bottom. Dilma shani hacha, tiava yada demais men la'alter garn v'yav gita, shari lo nasan laget, elu mishum d'lo nechale de tipo kamayavam. The whole point over here is he doesn't want his wife to go ahead and have to fall to Yibum. For kol shekein di yada demais gamar umegar shkich idol tipo yacham yavim. So he'll say this is different. In this case over here, we don't want to use onos rachmana patre. Why? Because the husband wants the get to be valid, because the whole point over here was to go ahead and avoid any potential Yibum situation. Incredible. I will say back to Talmud Beis. Says the Gemara, Maishna, if that's the case, Maishna me'ahu. What about the following case? Another interesting case. Me'ahu da amr lahu. A man says to his wife, Ilo asina mikana tlasin yomin. So husband says to his wife, if I don't come back within 30 days, lehavi gita. The get should be valid. So it's the same type of case. He's going away, whatever it is, right? He's going away. And I says to him, if I don't come back within 30 days, the get should be valid. Now what happens? He goes away. He's coming back. Asa upaske mavra. So we'll say, what happens? So he comes back, and so we'll say, it's interesting. Paske mavra could be translated in one of two ways. It can be translated as the bridge collapsed, right? The ma'avar is a bridge, right? Or paske mavra, there's no boat to take him across. Either way, it's the same idea, which is, what's happening? He's at the bank of the river, right? The other side of the bank of the river is town. And what is he saying? Amr lahu, chazu da'asai. He's jumping up and down. I'm back. You can imagine this scene. His wife was like, "What? I'm sorry, you can't hear you. Bad connection, right?" So ultimately, again, he's claiming, I'm back, I'm here. Now, meanwhile, again, he's on the other side of the river. He wants to be in complete compliance. The reason he can't get back home is because either the bridge is down, there's no boat to take him across. And I will say, what's the halacha? Right? Shmuel, lo shmei masya. Shmuel says, no, you did not arrive. You're not in compliance with the Tanai, and therefore the get is good. Now, I will say, once again, why don't we ask over here, Amai? I don't understand. Vaha menis anis, Rava. If you are correct, and there is such a concept of onis rachmana patre, that the Torah ultimately, again, exempts you from liability in cases of extenuating circumstances, so then why should the get be valid in this case? This guy did everything he could. He's stuck on the other side of the river. What else do you want from him? Shabbos is actually quite interesting. The Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, I will come back to that. The Gemara says, Dilma onsa de migla shiny. Umavra migle onse. This is actually quite interesting. So the Gemara suggests maybe this is a different kind of case. What's different kind of case? We'll say, the Ran already said this before, there's different kind of ones. Now in the Ran's view, there's what we call ones gadol and ones ktsas. Right? There's like major ones and minor ones. Major ones is where you cannot take action. Right? Something mamish actually prevents you. Minor ones is where technically you could take action, but it's not the prudent thing to do, right? Reuven's son is sick. He could leave his son to come and have lunch with me, but that's not the prudent thing to do. Now, the Gemara suggests something else. There is a foreseeable ones and an unforeseeable ones, right? What's the example of a foreseeable ones? Getting back to the side of the river and the bridge being down, or there not being an available boat to shuttle you to the other side, right? That's foreseeable. I will say now, obviously, it's foreseeable because stuff like that happened all of the time. So this is incredible. So Gemara wants to suggest that maybe when we say ones rachmana patre, when we actually go ahead and adopt that principle, which we do, which we'll see in halacha, we adopt that principle. We only adopt that principle for unforeseeable onsin. But if something is absolutely foreseeable, then what? You can't claim ones. You can't claim, which makes sense. You can't claim extenuating the whole chap of an extenuating circumstance is what? You could not have planned for it. But if something it is extenuating, but I absolutely could have planned for it, then halacha l'maisa, that is not an excuse. So therefore, the Gemara suggests over here, Reuven goes away. He says, if I don't come back in 30 days, the get is a get. He gets back. He's on the other side of the river. The footbridge is down, or there's no boat to take him across. That's foreseeable. You should have built that into your Tanai. And the fact that you didn't, that's on you. But you cannot claim ones rachmana patre. Shabbos say is such also like a profound life yisod. If you think about it, right? We start on things, we start on life initiatives, we start accomplishing things, and then things come up which derail our dynamic achievement. And we say, okay, I tried ones rachmana patre, extenuating circumstances. I would say so many times in life when we get derailed by circumstances, it's because we didn't plan well enough, and we didn't execute well enough, and we didn't think far enough ahead. Sometimes real onsin come about. It's true. And when there is a real ones, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, we'll talk about this in a little bit. But if it's a foreseeable situation, and I just didn't plan enough, I didn't think ahead enough, and therefore, again, my dynamic activity is derailed, you can't claim ones rachmana patre. In that case, that's on you. That's on you. An incredible yisod for life. So the Gemara says, finish up the sugya. So now what we have over here is like this. Now, by the way, we haven't yet come to a conclusion in our real estate case, how we started this Gemara. So now what we're just doing is kind of branching off into a whole bunch of ones rachmana. So what we see over here is that even according to Rava, who holds ones rachmana patre, that ultimately, again, that in a case of extenuating circumstances, you are legally exempt, that is only with an unforeseeable ones. But with a foreseeable ones, it's on you. Now let's go weiter. Rav Huna, according to Rav Huna, remember again, what did Rav Huna say? In the real estate case, which we started the Gemara, Rav Huna said, if I don't get back in 30 days, right? If I don't get back in 30 days, what's the halacha? In other words, even though it's an ones, Rav Huna said, I've lost my rights to the land. So Rabbi say, it seems to you that Rav Huna does not subscribe to the concept of ones rachmana patre. Says the Gemara, but there's another problem. Ul Rav Huna michdi asmachtehi v'asmachta lo kanya. Oh, this is so exciting. Rabbi say, listen to this. Here's the problem. It's an asmachta. Now, what's an asmachta? Asmachta is one of those words that I don't think it has a good English, there's not like a one-word translation. There's a phrase. Take a look at you see the rush? You see the rush in the left-hand margin? Actually, before we get to the rush, I'm sorry. First, take a look at the ran. Go back. I'm a lot of jumping over. The ran is back on Amud Aleph, Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, right? So the ran is there, 5 lines up from the bottom. Ulrav Huna michti asmachtehi v'asmachta lo kanya. Look at the Ran writes. The high gavra lo atfasei zechuse ela mishum desamech adaite delese. The chol ki agav nafilu below onus akon. I will say an asmachta is where a person essentially makes an exaggerated promise that he never really means to keep, but rather he's just making it because he's so confident in his ability to deliver. So we'll say the moment is just like this. Let's play this out, right? I am having a real estate dispute with Ruvain, right? I say I own the piece of land. Ruvain says he owns the piece of land. I have some documentation, not enough documentation. So what happens? I need to go get more documentation. So say to Beis Din, if I'm not back in 30 days, I'm going to go. I give up my rights to the land. Do I really mean that? Do I really mean that? Right? What am I saying? I'm so confident, first of all, in my ability to go ahead and deliver additional documentation. And 30 days, I was like, what you could accomplish in 30 days? 30 days is a lifetime. So of course I'll be back in 30 days. I never have in mind that I'm actually going to yield my rights to the land, because that would be crazy. And again, I'm just kind of using a little bit of a hyperbolic statement, an exaggerated statement, in order to make a point. That's an asmachta. It literally means a reliance, right? To be somech on something. So I'm being somech on my ability to deliver, and therefore I feel confident making a little bit of an exaggerated statement. So look at the Ran again. He says, good. So that's the Ran. I'm so confident that I'm going to be able to come back. Now I will say, in general, we say because an asmachta is an exaggerated statement, and I understand the person never had in mind to go ahead and really stick to that statement, therefore it doesn't really affect any level of legal reality. I will say, now go to Amud Beis, now look at the rush for just a moment. I'm sorry, one more piece. The rush in the left-hand column, you see it? Left-hand bottom margin. The rush, it's about 2, so small, getting older, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, about 11 lines down. So michti asmachtu. So we'll say, here we go. The Rush gives a good definition. He says, Da'amar milsa yisera. So a person is saying something extra. In other words, I will say, remember, in this case of the real estate, for example, do I have to say to Beis Din, in order to get more time to gather my paperwork, do I have to say, if I don't come back within 30 days, I give up my rights? Do I have to say that? I don't have to say that. I have a right to some time to gather, documentation. Da'amar milsa yisera. So we'll say, ultimately, again, I don't have to make this statement. So I make an additional statement in order to bolster my position. He goes on, Ubetorach hayosh yuchal lekaim dvarav v'lava ulekachisna aval lo kevan lahaknos me'olam. I never had in mind to actually yield my rights. Vasmachta lo kanyin. I both say, so now the Gemara says like this. Forget about owning Shachmana Patre. So let's take a step back, right? So I'm in Beis Din. I say the land is mine. Ruvain says the land is his. I have some paperwork, but not enough to support my claim. I say to Beis Din, I'll be back in 30 days. And if I'm not back in 30 days, I yield my rights. So now what happens? I can't get back. Ones, bridge is down or whatever, something, snowstorm. I can't get back. So Rav Huna says, sorry, you didn't make it back. Because it will say now, we assume that Rav Huna holds. Why sorry? Why do I lose my rights to the field? Because he does not subscribe to ones rachmana patre. He doesn't subscribe to that concept. But Rav Huna, there's another problem, asmachta lo kanya. I will say, by the way, I'll just give you like another example. This is how he paskin. I will say, gambling is halachically wrong. It's halachically illegal. Right? It's usher. Now, why is gambling illegal? So first, the Gemara calls it mesachik bekuvya. Right? Plays with dice. First of all, the Gemara says, number one, Because Eino mitzaref b'yeshuva shel olam. Person who gambles is doing absolutely nothing productive for the benefit of humanity. So therefore, again, when you're doing nothing productive for the benefit of humanity, that's asr. There's a bigger problem. I will say, gambling, the Gemara says, is a problem of theft. Theft, right? We're all putting our money on the table. I will say, the Gemara says, because you know what happens when people gamble? When they put their money in the middle, or wherever you're putting your money, right? So lamais, again, right? No one has intention to lose. So even though I'm putting my money there, I have every intention to win. And when I lose, I'm not really willingly giving up that money. So I will say that's an asmachta. You see, I put my money in the middle, and it looks like I'm sure, of course, I recognize I win, I lose. No, I'm not. I'm only doing this to win. So therefore, I will say, even though, again, I'm making a statement that I'm ready to lose the money, I'm not ready to lose the money. Therefore, when the other party wins and takes the money, he's taking that money against my will. That is a form of theft. So we'll say, so that's an example, ultimately, again, of asmachta. I'm making a statement that's a bit exaggerated, it's a bit hyperbolic in order to make a point, but I don't really have any intention of honoring it. That's not my point. So the Gemara is according to Rav Huna, why isn't this an asmachta? Asmachta lo kanya. So this is incredible. Shiny yachon, no, this case is different. Why? The mitzvah son zechusan. I will say this case is a little bit different. Why? Because I will say before I left, what did I do? I handed over my paperwork. So I will say handing over documentation already. This is not a smachta. So I will say a smachta is just about what could be construed as a hyperbolic promise. This is much more. There's an action here. Right? I've handed over my documentation. When you hand over your documentation, that is no longer simply an asmachta. Both say, I'm sorry, once more, if you just go back to this last time, I'm going to make you turn the page. Actually, it's not true. I will say, so second to last time, I'm going to make you turn the page. I will say, go back to the line just one moment. 3 lines up from the bottom. Shani hacha demitu san zechusa. Shekevan shiyatzu mirishuso v'etfisam biyad bezdin leka asmachta. See, I will say, the moment I hand over documentation, this is a real legal proceedings, right? This is already said. Asmachta, I will say, is where the promise is just words, not accompanied by any dynamic action. Here I've done something of significant legal consequence by handing over my documentation. Right? And again, the Rashi also points out where he says, Kigavoi dami v'lo havi asmachta. Fine. So the Gemara says, V'hechad de mitzvahs and lav asmachti. Is that true? So whenever you hand over documentation, we've left the realm of asmachta. Vatnan, we learned, what's is very interesting. Misha paramixas chovo, v'hishlis eshtaro, v'amar im eini nosin lo mikanad lamed yom, tein lo shtaro. So we'll say, listen to this fascinating case. I borrowed $1,000. I borrowed $10,000 from Ruvain. Let's make it a big case. I borrowed $10,000 from Ruvain. So we'll say, so now what happened? I paid back $5,000. Now we'll say, here's the problem. In a loan case, who normally holds the loan document? Who holds the loan document? The lender, right? Which makes sense, right? The document is the vehicle through which the lender collects. Here's the problem. I paid back half of the debt. So we'll say, what are we concerned about? If Ruvain, let's say I borrowed from Ruvain, if Ruvain holds the document, we'll say, what's the problem? He could potentially collect still another full 10,000, but I only owe him 5,000. So of course, what's the simple answer? Shover, write a receipt. Very back from our Ksuvas days, we don't like writing receipts. Why don't we like writing receipts? Because then, now who has the obligation to hold on to the receipt? Right, is me, the borrower. I have enough stuff to hold on to, right? So Lamais again, I don't want to. So I'll say, so we have an interesting case over here. So what happens? One of the things you could do is give the note to a third party, right? So now I'm not going to let Reuven hold on to a $10,000 note because I already paid back $5,000. I don't really want to hold on to a receipt, and writing up a receipt is a to-do. So instead, Reuven and I agree. Let's give the document to Shimon. Shimon knows that I paid $5,000 already. Shimon will hold the note until, again, I'm obligated to pay the other $5,000. Fine. Now I will say, listen to this thing. So I say as follows. I say, Va'amar, im eini nosin lo mikayim ad lamed yom, tein lo shtaro. So I say to Shimon, who's now holding the document, Shimon, if I don't pay Reuven the remaining $5,000, give Reuven, in 30 days, give Reuven back the document. Which essentially is saying what? If I don't pay the remainder in 30 days, then what? Give him the document, and he'll now have the power to collect the full 10,000. You have all 10,000. You have to leave aside ribis issues with this right now, leave aside interest issues, but that's the case. So I make this statement. So what's the halacha? Higiyas man, 30 days pass, and I didn't pay back the debt. So what's the halacha? Rabbi Yossi Omer Yitain. Rabbi Yossi says, look, then Shimon, the third party, should give the document back to Ruvain. I'm in non-compliance with the T'nai. As a result, Ruvain's going to get the shtar back. And now, of course, Ruvain's going to be able to collect another $10,000. So we'll say, Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo yitain. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, absolutely not. Do not go ahead and give it back. Don't give it back. And I will say, what's going on over here? So the assumption over here is, what's the machlokes? The machlokes is, asmachta kanya or lo kanya. Rabbi Yossi says, asmachta kanya. I made an asmach. In other words, we'll say, obviously, let's play this out, right? When Shimon, the third party, has the document, and I say, Shimon, if I don't pay back the remaining $5,000 in 30 days, give the document back to Ruvain. They will say, do I mean that? In other words, when a person makes a statement like that, let me say it differently. When is the only time I'm going to make a statement like that? When I'm absolutely, positively sure that I'm going to pay back the remaining $5,000 in 30 days. Otherwise, why in a million years would I ever say something like that? I will say, that's an asmachta. I'm making a hyperbolic statement because I'm so confident that I'm never going to have to rely on it. So now, unfortunately, 30 days go by, and now what happens? I haven't paid back. Rabbi Yossi says, asmachta kanya. Asmachta kanya. Listen, I understand you made an exaggerated statement, but you made it. You made it. I made it. Now I have to live with it. Give the document back to Ruvain, and it turns out that now Ruvain's going to be able to collect another $10,000. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, don't give it back. Don't give it back, because asmachta lo kanya. Clearly, again, it was an asmachta statement. Asmachta is not legally binding. Don't give it back. V'amrav Nachman, Amarav, ein halacha Rabbi Yossi. The asmachta kanya. The halacha does not follow Rabbi Yossi. Who holds asmachta kanya. And Rabbi says, so what do you see from here? Here is a case of where a document has been given over, and yet we still say what? Asmachta lo kanya. Let's loop this back to our real estate case. Remember again, Rav Huna says that when I don't come back in 30 days, I've given up my rights to the real estate. The Gemara says, Rav Huna, what about the fact that the statement is an asmachta? An asmachta lo kanya? Rav Huna says, no, the real estate case was different. Why? Because I handed over documentation. I will say, but what do you see from this last case over here? Even when you hand over documentation, we still hold asmachta lo kanya. So what's going on? To which the Gemara says, Shaini hacha de amar lebatlan zechusei. I will say, it's different over here. Why? Because lamaisa, again, a person is saying that ultimately, again, libatle zechusei. Ultimately, again, my rights should be negated. I will say, what does that mean? I'm sorry, last time. Go back to Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, just last line of the Ran. Last line, Kilomar, Shumochel, Kol Koach Uschos Sheyesh Lo Ba'osen Shtaros, Dechevan de Mechilehi, Les Ba'asmachta, De Miyad Zocha Baschara. So we'll say, listen to this. The Ran says, the real estate case is very different, Rabbosai, because essentially what I'm doing is, I'm being mochel my rights. So Rabbosai, there's a difference between yielding, versus being on the hook for something. So in the case when I'm yielding a right, that ultimately, again, Rav Huna says, asmachta kanya, right? In other words, when you're yielding a right, when I'm literally giving up my rights, that's not an asmachta. So both say, here's what's interesting. What Rav Huna says is like this. The definition of asmachta is an exaggerated statement that is going to make you obligated in something, right? And again, I never really have in mind that I'm going to come to that because I believe I'm going to deliver much earlier. This real estate case is not a case of asmachta, because what am I saying? If I don't come back within 30 days, then what? What's the halacha? I yield my rights. Rav Huna says that's a different kind of case. Yielding of rights is not an asmachta case. Asmachta is an exaggerated statement to make me liable to something. This case is a case of yielding rights, therefore he removes it from the parsha of asmachta. Shabbos say, halacha lamaisa, here we go. V'ilchasa, here you go, this is incredible. What's the halacha? Asmachta kanya. Number one, Rabbi say, paskin, asmachta kanya, which is very important, Rabbi say, that again, an exaggerated statement that a person clearly makes, because he never really thinks he's going to have to honor it. Right? That's the case of asmachta, right? I borrow. I paid back. If I don't pay back the remaining $5,000 in 30 days, give the document back to Reuven. Who in their right mind wants to do that? Obviously, I'm making that statement because I believe I'm going to pay back the debt within 30 days. So the Gemara says, well, you better be careful with what you say, because asmachta kanya, even if you make an exaggerated statement, because you're so confident you're never going to have to rely on it, halacha l'maisa, it's still a binding statement. However, with qualifications. V'hu delo anis, they're both saying that qualification number one is that as long as the reason you are not prevented from honoring it was because of an ones. If there was an extenuating circumstance, then halacha l'maisa, the asmachta will not kick in. So that's qualification number one. And qualification number two, v'hu, the kanu minei bebezdin chashuv. And I will say furthermore, the asmachta is only binding when halacha l'maisa, it's being done within a reputable bezdin. So in other words, I will say, so an asmachta that just two people kind of casually exchange, that's not going to work. But if the asmachta ultimately, again, if the t'nai is made in bezdin, and the reason I don't fulfill it is not because of an ones, then ultimately, again, the asmachta will be binding. And I will say, this is how the Rambam paskins, halacha l'maisa, the Rambam writes, this is in Hilchos Mechira, Perek Yud Aleph, Perek Yud Aleph, Perek Yud Aleph, halacha Yud Gimel. Asmachta, here it is, asmachta. So I will say, so I make an exaggerated statement, shakano miyado. And I will say, the way it was is, there was a Kabbalah's kinyan. Right? Bebezdin chashuv, an important bezdin, hare ze kana. So I will say, so for example, let's just use the case we used before. Halacha l'maisa, if I go ahead and I borrowed $10,000 from Reuven, and again, I paid back $5,000. We're in Bezdin. We both agreed to deposit the document with Shimon. And now I say, Reuven, if I don't pay you back the remaining $5,000, then Shimon, give Reuven back the document, which essentially allows Reuven to collect. And again, we do this in Bezdin. We do a kinyan to solidify it. It works. And now I don't come back within 30 days. What's the halacha? Shimon gives the document back to Reuven. However, if the reason I don't come back is why? Because of an ones, then ultimately, again, the asmachta will not be binding. Incredible. So we'll say, so ultimately, again, by the way, the same would apply in the real estate case as well. Rabbi say, let's go full circle. Now, in the real estate case, now I understand it. What happens in the real estate case? I have a din Torah with Reuven. I say I own the land. Reuven says he owns the land, right? And now what happens? We're in Bezdin adjudicating the case. I have some documentation, not enough to support my claim. I say, Bezdin, give me 30 days to get my documentation, and if not, I forgive my rights. You keep the paperwork. I forgive my rights. I will say, I don't come back within 30 days. What's the halacha? It depends. What does it depend on? Why didn't I come back within 30 days? If I just didn't come back, then enachinami. That's it. I've yielded my rights. Asmachta kanya. If, however, I didn't come back ultimately because of an ones, then ultimately, again, ones rachmana patre, and ones will prevent the asmachta from kicking in. I will say, just to end off, I'll share with you something absolutely beautiful on the idea of ones rachmana patre. See, I will say, the great tzaddik Rav Itzela Avarki says, why is the lashon ones rachmana patre? Why don't you just say ones pater? I mean, ones rachmana patre. Ones, extending circumstance, Hashem exempt. Why do you need this? So we'll say, listen to this beautiful idea. He says, Akasha, lama rachmana, hayayacha lomar ones pater. Just say, an ones is pater. That's it. Listen to this. We'll say how beautiful this is. Da Kadosh Baruch Hu bochin levavos. Kadosh Baruch Hu looks into the heart of man. V'imroa sha'ish hazeh chashka nafsha b'chol libo l'kayim es ha-mitzvah. If Kadosh Baruch Hu sees that a person truly desires to perform a mitzvah, rak ha'ones ma'akvo, but there is an ones in extenuating circumstance which is preventing me from fulfilling it. Al zeh amru rachmana patre. Rabbi, listen to how the tzaddik reads the word. Rachmana patre means shatorah hakidosha hiya shaliach va'oseh es ha-mitzvah ba'avuro. And I will say, ones rachmana patre means like this. Ones, if I really can't accomplish something in life because of an extenuating circumstance, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees how much I want to do it, but I can't. Rachmana patre, Hashem Himself will pater me, will exempt me. It's kiviyachal, as if Hashem becomes my shaliach to accomplish the things I cannot accomplish on my own. Rachmana, the Ribono Shel Olam himself becomes my shaliach, patre, to exempt me from my obligation. The power of only tzachmana patre. But of course, it only works if it's legitimate ones. If I don't accomplish the things in life I want to accomplish because of poor planning, because of a lack of drive, or not enough foresight, that's on me. But if it becomes something extenuating, then ultimately HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us, I got your back. Shkach Rabosai. Right.